Sentire media.
Imagine this. You've traced your family roots back to Italy, you're ready to claim your Italian citizenship, and you've done all the paperwork, gathered all the documents, and feel pretty optimistic about the process ahead. But then, roadblocks appear. Maybe your case falls under the infamous 1948 petition rule, or perhaps the wait time for an appointment at your local consulate stretches into the years. Suddenly, your dream feels a little less within reach. So what can you do? For many, the answer is to go to court. Yes, navigating the Italian legal system might sound a little bit intimidating, but it's often the most effective, or sometimes the only way to claim your Italian citizenship. So in today's episode, we are going to break it all down for you. You'll learn why court is often the right path for certain cases, what you can expect in terms of time and costs, the potential outcomes, and what happens after your case is decided. Plus, we'll share some expert advice from our head citizenship expert, Terry Wilson, to help you understand if this is the best option for you. And by the end of this episode, you'll have the tools and the knowledge to decide if going to court in Italy is the right move for your citizenship journey. Are you ready? Stay tuned because you won't want to miss this. I'm Samantha Wilson, Chief Dreammaker at smartmoveitaly.com, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show where each week I take you behind the scenes of what it's really like to move to Italy, introduce you to some fascinating people, answer your questions, and show you how starting a new life in Bel Paese is possible for you. Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy, the podcast where we break down everything you need to know about living, working, and thriving in this beautiful country. I'm your host, Samantha Wilson, and today's episode is for all of you who have your heart set on becoming an Italian citizen, but are wondering if going to court is the right option for you. Whether you're dealing with a 1948 rule, a no appointment availability at your consulate, or any other obstacle, including that new minor issue, going through the Italian court system can be an effective way to achieve your goal and an alternate option that maybe you haven't considered. Now, there's lots of benefits to going to court, but it's not a decision to take really lightly because it comes with its own timeline, its own costs, and some challenges. But to help us navigate this complex but rewarding process, I'm going to be joined by our head citizenship expert, Terry Wilson, who is going to share his insights on why people choose the court route and actually why he often recommends it over the consulate and what that process will look like. We're also going to talk about what happens after your case is decided. And we'll cover the pros and the cons so that you can decide if it's the right pathway for you. But before we bring Terry on, let me take a minute and set the stage. For those unfamiliar with it, there are two main reasons someone might pursue Italian citizenship through the court system. And the first is the 1948 rule, and the second is the no appointment case, which is when you can't get an appointment at your local consulate. In both of these scenarios, you will be petitioning the courts in Italy to actually make the decision on your citizenship fate. So let's start with the 1948 rule. This rule stems from a very old law that is actually considered unconstitutional in these days. So in the past, women didn't have the right to pass their citizenship forward onto their children, and because this was only the right of a man. This is one of those things in the past where women just couldn't do. In fact, women automatically assumed the citizenship of their husbands without independently choosing for themselves. For example, if a married Italian couple moved to Italy in the early 1900s and the man naturalized American, the woman, his wife, would automatically become an American citizen as well through derivative naturalization, simply because her husband became an American. It wasn't necessary for her to make this decision on her own. She just became American anyway, and in turn gave up her rights to Italian citizenship. And if this happened when their American-born child was still under the age of 21, then there was no way to claim their citizenship. The woman just had no right to pass it forward. So if your Italian ancestor was a woman, and your family line falls into this category, your case will automatically be rejected if you apply through the consulate. Even in today's terms, it will automatically be rejected. And the only way to claim your citizenship in this situation is to challenge the law in the Italian courts. The courts drew a line in the sand, making January 1st, 1948, the date in which a woman was legally able to pass her citizenship forward to the next generation. So if your bloodline moves from a female ancestor after 1948, then you don't need to go to court. In fact, you can't. But if it does before 1948, so if a woman passes her citizenship forward before that child was born in 1948, then the only option you have is to go to court here in Italy, based on what we call now a 1948 petition. Now, the good news about all this, well, the courts have consistently ruled in favor of applicants in these cases. If your documents are in order, it's pretty much a slam dunk. In fact, the Italian government doesn't even object to the petition unless, of course, the citizenship line was broken before the child was 21, meaning this woman, this female ancestor, independently naturalized before the next in line was 21 years old. If this is the case, then the line will not be able to be proceeded in court in Italy. This is what we call a minor issue. Now, if you want to know more about the minor issue, you can check out a previous episode where I talk about it. So if your Italian bloodline moves through a female ancestor that passes the citizenship on before 1948, and the next in line was under 21 years old, then, my friend, you have a 1948 petition and must proceed via court in Italy. And there's benefits to going to court. If that's you and you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to go to court. Well, I'm telling you, right now, it's actually a better option. First, you don't need to attend court yourself. Your Italian lawyer will do all of it for you here in Italy. Second, everyone who falls under the bloodline can be named in the same petition. So that means everyone that's in there can get their citizenship in one petition in one swoop. And some of our cases have had dozens of applicants on the same petition, all getting their citizenship through one court action. So it's a great way to share the costs if you have a big family, which there are a lot of Italian big families out there. And finally, court is a lot faster these days than going through a consulate. It can take maybe 1.5 to 2 years to finalize the court case. So in many cases, choosing a 1948 pathway may be your best option. But what if you want all of those benefits that I just mentioned, but you don't qualify for a 1948 case? Well, there's still hope. If you've tried to apply for citizenship through your local consulate, you may have been faced with endless wait times. In fact, in some places, it can take years just to get on the wait list, let alone an appointment. And then once you get to submit your application, it can take another few years for a decision. That is, if they don't give you homework. So in some cases, applying through a consulate can take 6 to 10 years. And for many people, it's simply just not feasible or even acceptable, especially if they're eager to start living their Italian dream. But there is good news because there's also an option of petitioning the courts to move the jurisdiction to Italy to a judge to decide your case. And this is based on the fact that you cannot get an appointment in your home consulate. And we call this a no appointment petition, and it's one of the best ways and probably one of the more popular ways these days to apply. In these cases, going to court in Italy to claim your citizenship can bypass the consulate backlog entirely and speed up that process again to about 1.5 to 2 years, a lot different than 10 years. Our legal team handles many no appointment cases, and the evidence we need is just 30 days of screenshots from the Prenota system, which is your reservation system for booking an appointment, at your Italian consulate website. And it has to show that there are no appointments. So 30 days of screenshots taken at different times of the day is all we need as evidence. And the same benefits apply. So a faster application, no need to come to court. All family members can be included in the same petition, regardless of where they live, of course, as long as they too can't get an appointment. So if your cousin lives in Washington, D.C., but she can get an appointment and you can't in California, unfortunately, your cousin cannot be included in the petition. Of course, pursuing your case in court will cost more, but for many, it's the most efficient and reliable way to claim your Italian citizenship. And if you have multiple applicants, then by sharing the cost, it becomes super affordable. Well, have I piqued your interest? I'm sure you have a lot more questions, so let's bring in our citizenship expert, Terry, to walk us through exactly how it works. All right, Terry, welcome back to the podcast. I know that you and the team at our citizenship division have helped so many people navigate the process of claiming Italian citizenship through courts, but there's a lot more in the process that many people don't even talk about, or there's a lot of confusion around. So I want to dive into that today. So let's start with the basics. For those who are new to this process, can you explain why someone might choose to go the court route for their Italian citizenship instead of, say, applying at the consulate?
Yeah, so there's really three ways or three reasons you would go to court in Italy. One is for a 1948 case, which is when one of your female ancestors is passing on her citizenship prior to 1948. The courts, the government or the administrative arm that applies for citizenship, or you apply citizenship, which is the consulates of the communes, they won't approve a case in which a woman is passing on her citizenship before 1948. The simple reason is the government, Italy as the republic was created in 1948, so the government doesn't believe it can go back past the time when the republic was created. So the courts view this as sort of a discriminatory fact, essentially stopping women from passing on their citizenship, so the courts would approve it. That's a 1948 case. The other one would be a no appointment case in which you can't get an appointment at a consulate, which is very much the case throughout most of North America and South America. If you can't get an appointment in the case, you can apply to the court to change the jurisdiction so the court can hear your case. And essentially, you're making an argument that the consulates, because of there's no appointments, is stopping you from getting your citizenship, and therefore you would want the court to recognize your citizenship. And to do that, you have to apply to prove that there's no appointments, and therefore change the jurisdiction to the court. And the only other time you can go to court for citizenship is when there is an unlawful denial of your citizenship at the consulate appointment. So if you go to your consulate appointment and there is an unlawful denial, then you can challenge that, appeal that to a court in Italy. Those are really the three reasons you would go to court in Italy to get your citizenship recognized.
Right. So why would you choose, if you have the choice, why would someone choose to go to court instead of, say, applying at the consulate?
Yeah. So essentially applying at the consulate, as we know over the last couple of years, applying at the consulate is a time-consuming wait for an appointment. So, for example, New York, I think New York is somewhere around a 6-year wait for an appointment. The last time I looked at it, I think they were at 8,500 in their wait list, and they only do 50 appointments a month. So that if you do the math, it's somewhere around 6.5 years. That's just to get the appointment. And then it could be up to 18 months to 2 years for them to recognize you. So you're looking at somewhere between a 6.5 to 8 year process. Now, again, New York is the busiest consulate in North America, but other consulates are similar. So one of the reasons you would go to court is because it just takes so long to go through the consulate process. The other reason you would go to court is because the consulate would never approve you. For example, in a 1948 case, it's a well-known fact that consulates will not approve a 1948 case. So the only option you have is to go through the courts.
Right. So sometimes it's your only option, and then sometimes you actually have a choice. I just want to ask, though, with the wait times, I know you were mentioning New York and talking about the U.S., but we help people from all over the world. So what are the consulate waits like in Canada or Australia or
the consulate waits, they're a little less than New York or Miami or San Francisco, for example, but not much. You're looking at several years at a consulate just about anywhere in the world. several years to get an appointment. Now, you can look at a court case as being quicker in the fact that if you have a completed package with all your translations, your sworn translations, and a completed package, and you go to court, you're looking somewhere in the range of about 18 months to 2 years from getting a court case done all the way through the process to about getting your passport. So you're looking somewhere around 18 months to 2 years. So one of the options is going to court is a quicker notion than going through the consulates.
Right. So if you have a choice, and I know there was an old, myth or rumor spreading around there that if you could only do a 1948 if it was your last resort, if you couldn't do a consulate through the mail line, but that's not the case. You can actually choose to do a 1948 case, even if you have an option through the consulates. Correct?
Yeah, because essentially having to prove that the male in the family broke your line, for example, so you could go to 1948, is still another discriminatory act. It's still choosing the man over top of the woman in preference. So actually, that's sort of a myth that you have to prove that the male line is broken first before you go to a 1948 case. We go straight to 1948 case, and as a matter of fact, in most 1948 cases, there is no mention of the spouse, the male spouse, in the 1948 case. It's just proving the Italian woman passing it on before 1948.
Okay. So let's say someone has a 1948 case or they're deciding to go via no appointment. Tell me about the court process. Like, what does it actually look like? Yeah, so
is particular when it comes to 1948 cases, there's no real sort of Perry Mason moment in any of these cases. There's essentially, it is a submission of documents. The lawyers do a lot of work in the fact that they write a petition, which sort of explains the documents you have. The petition is a synopsis of your documents, essentially. So it's purely a document submission time for the court. Essentially, your lawyer, whoever's representing you, is passing these documents on to the court so they can approve your citizenship. There's usually 99.9% of the time no opposition. The government, because you're suing the government for your citizenship, the government doesn't send anybody to court. Sometimes there's not even a court case or a court period. It's just you submit your documents on that day of court, and there's really no opposition whatsoever. 1948 is an extremely well-established court precedence in Italy, so there's really no opposition to it, and so it's just a submission part in court. There's no arguments on the other side. There's just an examination of your documents. Now, the court process has changed over recent years, and particularly recently. Before, judges used to make decision on the day. Now that has changed, and judges are now putting it over for decision. Also, the Italian court system has slightly changed a bit in the fact that in most cases, citizenship cases were heard by honorary judges, and honorary judges were making decisions. It now appears that the court system has changed slightly in the fact that honorary judges now have to get the approval of, I guess we would call them regular judges, the approval of regular judges before they pass sentence or pass judgment and approve the order. We feel that sort of secondary approval is going to extend that decision-making process after your submission of documents.
Right. So we might be looking a little bit longer than 2 years. We're not so sure.
Yeah, we're not sure. This is brand new that they're now starting to do it. It's sort of been a memo or a directive coming down from the Ministry of Justice. And this is how they want to sort of do it more often. I think it's more to do with having some consistency around decisions.
The decisions, yeah. So just to make a quick note, if people are listening thinking, well, that doesn't sound too hard, I can gather my documents. I think it's important to note, though, that you have to be an Italian lawyer in order to do this process in court. You can't do this. You can't represent yourself, correct?
Right. You can't represent yourself. And as a matter of fact, you would give a lawyer, an Italian lawyer, a limited power of attorney. That limited power of attorney is a signed document that you notarize. For example, in the United States, you would notarize it and get it apostilled, because that is submitted in court as proof that this lawyer has the power to represent you. So it's actually part of the evidence that's submitted. Yeah.
So most of the time, I know that just recently, I think we had 7 petitioners on one file just last week, I think, get their citizenship. How long did that process take? So just to give people an idea of a regular timeline, when was the petition filed? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. The petition was filed last year. And I think, so it takes approximately from the time you submit a completed package, a completed document package that the lawyer is willing to go to court with, to the time of getting a court date, could be anywhere between 5 to 10 months. In a busier court, because again, sort of to give you the idea of where you go to court in the provincial tribunal that oversees the commune in which your ancestor was born. That's a change from June of 2022. So now the court times really do vary, because if you go to a much busier court like Florence, Milan, Napoli,
Right,
then obviously it's going to take a little longer. If you go to a smaller commune or smaller province or court, then it's going to take a little less time. So you're looking at about 5 to 10 months to get a court date. Then after the court date, there is a mandatory 60-day, 2-month appeal period, because you are suing the government for your citizenship. So the government is allowed, it's mandated, the government's allowed a 60-day period to appeal that case. They never do, but again, it's in legislation, so there's a 60-day appeal period. Only after the 60-day appeal period can the lawyer apply for a certified copy of the order. They have to wait for the appeal period done so they can essentially put that in the order that there was no appeal, and they can get a certified copy of the order. That copy of the order can take a couple months to get from the court, because again, it's a process in the court system to give you a certified copy of the order. And then that certified copy order gets presented or submitted to the commune in which your ancestor was born for everybody on the petition to be registered.
So they get a birth certificate, an Italian birth certificate.
Yeah. So before we get the registration at the commune several years ago could take a couple weeks. Now we're looking at a couple months to get it registered, because again, the nature in which it's going to a commune, which are involved in a whole bunch of other stuff, and registration of your is sort of goes on the back burner sometimes. So it takes a couple months there. Then once you're registered, and to make it clear, the court isn't the one that gives you citizenship. It recognizes your citizenship, but your citizenship, you become Italian once you're registered at the commune. So it's a big deal that you're approved or recognized by the court, but the actual sort of official making you an Italian citizen is when you're registered at the commune. And they'll give you essentially an Italian birth certificate. It might say I was born in Ohio, but it's an Italian birth certificate. And with that certificate, you then register. If you don't live in Italy, you then register in ARE, which is the data bank for all Italian citizens that live abroad. Only when you're registered there are you allowed to apply for your passport. So you can apply your passport at the consulate, your local consulate, and that takes so all that period. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on after the court case for you just still to be recognized.
Yeah, I think this is really good for people's expectations to understand the timeline. So let's just do a quick recap. So about a year to the court date, and then from the court date, I mean, if you're lucky, depends if you're in a busy consulate, but commune, let's just say a year to the court date. And then the judge makes a decision, and then there's a 60-day waiting period, so 2 months to wait for that appeal process.
Yeah, but the decision, the decision could take several months as well, because again, we have this judge's approval process that's going on. So we're looking at probably 2 to 3 months for the decision to be made, then a 60-day period. So that's an extra 5 months.
Okay, so now we have 5 months after the court date, and that's just to get through that piece of bureaucracy. And then after that 5 months, then we request, or the lawyer requests, documentation to prove the decision, because that needs to be submitted to the commune. And this documentation then can take a few months, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it could take a couple months to get your certified copy of the order from the court.
Okay. So now we're at about 7 months post court date. And then at that point, then it goes to the commune, and we want them to then register your citizenship in their documents or in their books, which can then take another couple of months, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so then we're looking at almost another year post decision, post court date.
Yeah, it could take up to a year to get it completed. Now, again, there's a lot of variables there. Some communities do it very quickly. Some communities take their time. We're at the mercy sometimes of the administrative arm after court to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's really great information, because I think what a lot of people believe is that as soon as they get their court date and they, are told, okay, you are an Italian, it's finished. And it really isn't. There's still another big chunk of bureaucracy that takes a lot of time to weed through.
Yeah. Now, and again, remember the certificate you get from the commune makes you a citizen. So you can come to Italy after that and stay as long as you want, because your passport is only your travel document. The document you get from the commune that says you're a citizen, that's your citizenship document. So that's when if you've planned to come to live to Italy, you can come live on Italy on that document. You don't have to come with your passport.
Right. You can travel with your other passport, with your second passport, your home nationality. And then when you arrive in Italy, you can use your citizenship document for all of the processes you need to do here. Yeah.
Having a passport is the coolest thing in the world. Holding up a second passport is the coolest thing in the world. But legally, you are a citizen as soon as you get that piece of paper from the commune.
Okay. Well, this is great. But one thing I want to finish up with here, let's talk about money, because it's always, how much more is this going to cost? Because again, this could be potentially, it could be a choice for someone. They could be choosing between waiting endlessly for a consulate appointment, or, hey, let's just go to court and get it done with a no appointment case. What should people be budgeting for if they're considering going to court?
Yeah. So, it's smart move. You're looking at, just for the court, we do it in part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is the court side. So part 1 is the document recovery side. Part 2 is the court side. For the court appearance, for engaging the lawyer and doing everything up to getting the certified order, we charge 4,800 euros for the first applicant, and then 700 euros for every additional applicant after that, and 500 euros for a minor. And that is to employ a lawyer here to represent you in court, to submit your documents, write the petition, get the order, submit it to the commune. All that is included in that. There are some extra costs on top of that. There is a court filing fee. The court filing fee is essentially a charge created by the court that you have to pay the court for filing your citizenship. I think the last time we did it's around 560 euros. The reason that I can't give you an exact number is, one, the courts change the number every once in a while. It usually never changes to go down, to be less, but they do change the number. But there is a separate court filing fee that's paid to the court for filing these documents. It's more of an administrative court fee. The second fee that has just recently come on, like last week, is essentially the tax office of Italy now feels that they need to get paid their tax. So now, once you have your court case won, the tax office here in Italy makes a decision between about 1 to 200 euros about tax you have to pay for being the winner of a court case here in Italy.
Oh, okay.
And they'll submit.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah, and so essentially, but the problem is we don't really know what that is initially. The tax office, once you go past your appeal period, once you get your certified copy of the order, that's when they make the decision of what the tax cost is for that case as well. But on average, it's between 100 to 200 euros.
All right. So they should budget for the lawyer fees, which range anywhere from like $5,000 like ours, and I know I've seen other ones that go way, way, way higher than that, but you have the fee for the lawyer. And then you also have to be prepared for these other little fees like the court costs, probably another $1,000 if they budget accordingly, because they also need a codice fiscale, their tax ID number, when some of these little things can certainly start adding to it. So it might be safe to tell people, about 1,000 euros in court fees and extra costs?
Yeah, anywhere between 700 to 1,000 extra costs on top of that. For a court case.
Good. Okay. So last thing, what are some common problems? What happens? Do people, I know that 1948 case is pretty much a slam dunk, and we don't take a case to court unless it is, the documents are perfect, but what can go wrong?
Well, the biggest thing is always, from the start, is always naming discrepancies and how the courts view the naming discrepancies. Now, again, with Smart Move, not only do you have our team reviewing your documents and giving you solutions for these naming convention or naming discrepancies, our legal team does a legal review before they go forward. So we're pretty solid about what, if there is an issue, either it's been solved or it can't be solved, and our clients are fully aware. The only other issues really are, if a judgment is made out of the blue, or if something untowards. But the majority of times, like the minor issue in 2022, that sort of came out of the blue and really put a damper on a lot of court cases in Italy that are still probably going through the appeals period as we're speaking. But the majority of time, again, if your documents are in order, it really is not necessarily, don't think of it as much as a court case, as more of a process to get you recognized. If your documents are in order, the courts are more than willing to hear the arguments and to hear, to review your documents and approve you and recognize you as an Italian citizen. Yeah. So there's really not that many bumps in the road after your documents are in great shape.
Yeah, it's a really, really great process. As I said earlier in the show, explaining the benefits of it. Everybody can be on one petition. It's faster. It's the other thing too is that if there are some kinds of discrepancies in a file, whether it's a name discrepancy, when you're appearing before a judge, there's an option to be able to argue the discrepancy compared to speaking to a clerk at a consulate. It's not so simple. Yeah. But when you're talking to a court, you tend to have learned ears that you're listening or that are listening in. So sometimes you can make your argument a little stronger.
Yeah, and at a consulate or a commune, they're pretty bound by the regulations put out by the Ministry of Interior. But the courts, we have the ability to supply supplemental documentation that wouldn't be accepted at a consulate or a commune. For example, at a court, we might be able to produce a certified census from the United States that proved the people were together at one time. Or if there's a naming issue, we might be able to produce other documentation, a baptismal certificate or something that the courts would be willing to hear about. Those are documentations that can't be produced at a commune or a consulate, because it's really not in their checklist of things that the Ministry of Interior says are acceptable. The courts are a little bit more flexible, because in the petition, the lawyer can talk around or write around the documentation and explain it a little bit more when it comes to supplemental documentation to support naming conventions or naming discrepancies or naming or date discrepancies.
Okay. And there's lots of those with Italians for sure.
Yes, there's lots of those. The biggest problem with naming stuff is middle names. Middle names are, the bane of existence for anybody collecting documentation because it doesn't really exist in Italy, but they do exist in the United States and other English-speaking countries.
Well, perfect. This is all such great information. And I'm sure if people that are listening have been wondering whether or not they had some options, this is going to shed a lot of light into the system and how it all works. So thanks again for coming on and for all that great information. Now I want to wrap up with some more tips for anybody considering the court route for Italian citizenship. The first thing is to work with a lawyer. Obviously, you can't do this alone. You can't go to court on your own. This really isn't a DIY process. So you need to hire a lawyer who specializes in Italian citizenship cases. There's lots of them out there. So weigh their experience with their fees as well as the time frame and their caseload to decide which one is really good for you. Second, plan for the costs. We talked a little bit about those costs. There's also, aside from the legal fees, there's court fees, there's taxes, as Terry explained, and some other little fees. So budget for all of the expenses that might come out. Also, be patient. We did talk about the time frame, so it isn't just this long wait for the court date. It's actually a lot of waiting after, which can be super frustrating because I realize that you want your citizenship right away. But again, patience is a virtue in Italy. And then finally, really understanding the outcome. So winning your case again is only the beginning. You need to follow through with registering your citizenship in IRE, which is that database for all Italian citizens living abroad. It's important. You must do it or you can't get your passport. So make sure that you really understand all of the additional steps. And then, of course, if you're considering going to court for your Italian citizenship and you want to know if you qualify, feel free to book a free call with Zach, who's in our citizenship team. I'll put the link in the show notes, and or you can go to smartmoveitaly.com/citizenship. And you know, the key to succeeding in any bureaucratic process in Italy is a combination of preparation, working with the right people, understanding the timeline and the costs, and keeping your expectations in check. And there's no way to speed things up, so you just have to settle into the process and hang on for the ride. And it might get a little bit bumpy, but once you reach your destination and you're officially an Italian citizen, I promise it's totally worth it. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions, all left on our voicemail. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Hi, Samantha. This is Wendy Forwell. I had posted on one of the Instagram posts regarding the 90 days in 180 days. My understanding, we're going to be doing residency, and I'm actually having your company do our residency when we do that. But my understanding is that because I am an EU citizen of Ireland and my husband's Canadian, that we can actually be in any one EU country for up to the 90 days, and then we have to go to another EU country. As long as we don't overstay the 90 days and claim residency. I didn't, from everything that I've been reading, and I actually got a response from someone, it can actually be my husband getting free access to other countries as long as he's with me, and we have the paperwork for our marriage and so on and so forth, and we have records showing that we were in these other countries. Let me know your thoughts.
Hello, Wendy. Really good question. And one of those, I kind of have a bit of a giggle when you said you got an answer from someone who said, gave you direction, because it's one of those things that is really well misunderstood. So here's the truth. You as an EU citizen have the freedom of movement. You're Irish, so you have the freedom of movement throughout the Schengen zone. You can stay anywhere you like for as long as you want. You can work. You can go to school. Now, the rules are that you have to, in Italy, you have to declare your presence after 30 days, after 3 months. But your husband, on the other hand, who is not a European citizen, is still bound and will always be bound by the 90 days out of a 180-day period. So regardless if he's with you or married to you, he cannot be in any Schengen country and a combination of countries for more than 90 days out of a 180-day period. It doesn't matter that he's with you and you're permitted. He is not permitted unless he has a visa to stay in one of those countries for longer. So what happens typically is that if we're doing your residency, you'll be moving to Italy. So you will establish your residency, your legal residency as a European here in Italy. Once you have that established, then your husband will apply for a permesso di soggiorno, which is a permit to stay. And this will allow him to stay in Italy, only Italy, for more than 90 days out of a 180-day period. If you want to travel to any other Schengen country, that is, there's 27 countries in the Schengen zone, so France or Spain or Germany, wherever, he is still bound to 90 days out of a 180-day period combined in all of those countries. So you cannot just spend 90 days in France and then 90 days in, Germany and then 90 days in Spain. It's not, won't work. He still is bound. So the only place he can stay, if you are a resident and if he applies for permesso di soggiorno, is in Italy for more than 90 days. Everywhere else, he's stuck to the 90 out of 180. It's a big misunderstanding, so make sure you don't get caught with that.
Hi, Samantha. My name is Dee, and I wanted to ask a question about moving to Italy, please.
Hi, Dee. I love that. I mean, I guess it's not a question. It's kind of a question about a question, but I love your accent, by the way. You know what? The reason that we added this in here, you didn't send the rest of what your question was. So we're just going to use this because we're getting a lot of these kinds of questions these days. Just, I want to move to Italy. What do I do? So there are a lot of moving parts to moving to any country, any new country, especially Italy, because it is notoriously bureaucratic. There's a language barrier and it's a long way away from where you are. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. You just have to take very specific steps and have a very solid plan to follow. And it usually takes, for most people, 6 months to a year to actually put all of those plans in motion. In particular, if you need a visa, if you're not European or Italian or married to one, then you're going to need about 6 months just to get your visa and everything in order. However, if not, if you have, immigration access to Italy, it can be a little faster. The best advice I can give anybody who is just thinking, is Italy right for me, is to start with evaluating your situation. Now I have an episode on the podcast that says you want to move to Italy, start here. And that goes through all of the steps that you need to think about when you're planning your move. Also on our website, and I'll put it in the show notes here, there's a little free guide called the 7 Key Decisions You Need to Make Before Moving to Italy. This will give you a really good foothold, I get a good base, your foundation of where you need to start building your plan from and to decide if Italy is really good. And of course, keep reading about Italy and watching YouTube and listening, of course, to my podcast and deciding if really the culture and the lifestyle here is exactly what you're looking for. Because it's good for some people, but for others, it might not be a perfect fit. And it's always about you. So I hope that helps, Dee, and I hope to see you in Italy.
Hi, it's Farah. I'm calling from the Philippines. I want to go to school in Italy. How can I do that?
Hi, Farah. Thank you for the message. And yeah, studying in Italy is an option for you for sure. You will obviously need to have a visa. First of all, you need to find a program that you want to study in Italy. You'll have to find the university, and it has to be accredited university that will permit you to get a visa. And most of the time, these universities and these schools will help you with the visa process, or at least give you the documentation that you need in order to apply. And you'll apply for this visa at your local Italian consulate. And it's the process of applying will depend on the rules and the requirements of your consulate. So the first thing you need to do is, first of all, find a school that you love. And before you enroll and pay any money, go to the consulate, call the consulate, write an email to the consulate, and ask them for all of the guidelines and the requirements for a student visa to attend that particular course, and then follow the exact guidelines point by point, and then follow through with the application. I hope that helps. You know what? We have a lot of foreigners that come to Italy and study here, both here in Florence and, of course, in Siena and Milan and Rome, all over the place. So it's really worthwhile. If you can do it, I highly recommend it. Well, that's all for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about visas, citizenship, property, and, well, really anything about moving to Italy that you would like me to answer in an upcoming episode, please feel free to send us a voicemail at our website at smartmoveitaly.com/podcast, or just click on the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and remember, you can find all of the resources and the links to the people and the places that I mentioned in this episode inside the show notes. Ciao for now. A New Life in Italy podcast is a production of Sentire Media, created and hosted by me, Samantha Wilson. Production by London Nero, and with special thanks to Ali Frothingham, Sofia Pisana, and the entire team at Sentire. Follow A New Life in Italy wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you're thinking of moving to Italy, whether full-time, part-time, or for a lifetime, come and see me over at smartmoveitaly.com and we'll help you get here and start living your best life. And don't forget, if you love this episode, please rate and leave a review. It's much appreciated. I can't wait to meet up with you again next week, same time, same place. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.